Yo, this is the Scarcity Studios YouTube channel. Please don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe. And our sponsors are Alpha Claims and Hire Birmingham, the leading and best accident management company. Get a replacement car anywhere in 1 hour. I really appreciate you joining me today, and this story comes from London and it's about a march that took place on Thursday, the 5th of November. Police have released a statement to say nearly 200 people were arrested for breaching coronavirus rules after taking part in a demonstration in central London on the first night of the new lockdown in England. We sent our reporter Dave Nathan to the scene to get the footage from the event. The media described it as an anti-lockdown march, which in part it was, but it was also the Million Mask March, which is an anti-authoritarian demonstration that takes place every year across the world. It was organised by a hacktivist group called Anonymous. Police initially struggled, they said, to control the fluid, fast-paced protest, with officers ordering them to return home. Protesters were snatched from the crowd and wrestled to the floor and arrested by police. They gathered in crowds. One protester told the press that it's because the government is lying to us and it isn't fair. The protester was aged in his 30s and from South London and preferred not to be named, and said his business has closed again and will be closed for 6 months, and now they've closed it again. He's protesting for all the people who can't see what's going on. They said the protesters played music and chanted freedom as they marched up and down the Strand, Trafalgar Square, Oxford Circus and Soho, before a large group was finally contained by police officers that they described as a kettle on Oxford Street, and that was kept there for several hours. Other groups were tackled by the police when they tried to congregate in Leicester Square on Friday afternoon also. The Metropolitan Police said that officers made 190 arrests for breaching coronavirus rules. 189 were issued with fixed penalty notices, and one was investigated for a £10,000 fine. As soon as they got out of the train station, it became hostile, a protester said. They was wanting to get all the people together and arrest them.
At the moment you can stay, so Richard's right under human rights.
You just said you can. Under international law, the government is not allowed.
Among those arrested was Piers Corbyn, the former Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn's brother. He has emerged, they said, as a figurehead of the anti-lockdown protest and has been arrested at least 4 times at different protests. A statement on his Facebook group said he was being held at Lewisham Police Station. Police said there was no reason to breach any sort of rules about coronavirus related stuff. And this is one in a series of different marches across the UK. Liverpool, Manchester and Birmingham have had anti-lockdown based marches. This is not necessarily just about the lockdown. So of course this raises the question of who is Anonymous and what do they want and what do they do? For this part of the video, I will reference an article by the Atlantic.com technology website. The author of this article, Dale Berron, claims to have spoken to several members of Anonymous and also depicts their origins as well. They say in this article that in the mid-2000s, a man called Aubrey Cottle, who was part of a group of online pranksters and called themselves trolls, orbited 2 online message forums called Awful and 4chan. Thousands of users were on these boards, mostly young men, and they hung out in chat rooms, feuded online and met up in real life. They called themselves Anonymous, and the name derived, they say, from the way that 4chan presented usernames if none was specific. The site displayed Anonymous by default. In 2007, a man appeared at Cottle's door. Cottle was 20 years old and still living with his mother in Toronto. As Cottle tells the story, confirmed by his friend in part, the man was from the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, the nation's equivalent to the CIA. Cottle was curious and he let him into his room that was littered with hard drives, server equipment and 90s hacker mags called 2600. He was asked if he'd be willing to use his abilities against Al-Qaeda and terrorist groups, the agent asked, and Cottle said in an interview that a number of thoughts flashed through his mind. Is this guy for real? I would never work for the feds. Should I delete this? Anonymous mainly focused initially on raiding forums. They would flood online games and chat rooms with an army of their own users to disrupt the space. They loved raiding a game called Habbo Hotel by lining up avatars to block access to the online pool. When 4chan began cracking down on the raids, Anonymous migrated to copycat sites that they created called 420chan, which Cottle had created to discuss his principal interests that were drugs and professional wrestling. Cottle became the de facto leader of Anonymous, a role that he relished, they said. And Cottle said in an interview that he set out a codified, half-joking set of rules for the group that became known as the infamous rules of the internet. They included, we are Anonymous, Anonymous is Legion, and Anonymous never forgets. And as we see in the Million Mask March, a lot of people wear Guy Fawkes masks. And in the interview, Cottle said that his friends started to use the mask as they chose it because of their love for the film V for Vendetta. It was a 2005 film based on a dystopian fiction comic book. V was the protagonist and dons the disguise to fight a futuristic fascist police state. Cottle later goes on to say in the interview that he declined the offer from the Secret Service and went back to doing what he did online anyway. Shortly after, the authorities were at his door and Anonymous would make the news. A Fox affiliate in Los Angeles run a segment on the group, framing them as hackers on steroids. The report implied that Anonymous was perhaps a terrorist organisation, overlaying the narration of the segment with footage of a van exploding. The segment delighted Anonymous. Hacking was something its members did for their own amusement, and now in the eyes of the media and the government, they were a shadowy and powerful cabal capable of anything. It was something people wanted to believe about them, something they could use to their benefit. Anonymous spent much of 2007 harassing a neo-Nazi radio host because he was an easy target, they said. Anonymous would clog his phone lines and bring down his website and order hundreds of pizzas to his house. The fun ended very quickly when they realised that Turner had turned into an FBI informant, and they discovered this from hacking him. Anonymous found a new target and they shifted to the Church of Scientology. The video that went viral in the mask was covered again by the news, and this created enthusiasm and a lot of people started to follow them online. Several hundred people protested in New York City against Scientology for Anonymous, and they dressed in Guy Fawkes masks. And this is when they started to change from being an online activism to real world activism. It later goes on to say the Anonymous movement split into two factions. One was trolls and the other was activists. Cottle led the trolling side, but his contingent soon lost control. The Anonymous operation supported Julian Assange, and the WikiLeaks snowballed into a massive attack against PayPal and MasterCard for blocking WikiLeaks donations. Once again, following media attention, thousands of Anons flooded the chat rooms they had previously used to coordinate invasions into computer games. Before long, they had uncovered various different projects and security things that they released via a group that was called LulzSec. They went on to do a high-profile hacking spree on major corporations like Sony and several government agencies. And in 2012, the FBI arrested one of the members of LulzSec, who was known as Sabu, a 28-year-old man living in New York City in public housing. Sabu became an informant, they said, and he denied ever being responsible for arrests, but did not deny becoming an informant. Anonymous never fully recovered, and small groups of Anonymous, they say, remained, but the energy dissipated. Their most high-profile attack in recent years came in 2014 in Ferguson, Missouri, in response to the police shooting of Michael Brown. The group took down the city's web servers and publicised the home address of the police chief, When officials were not forthcoming with Brown's death, Anonymous leaked audio of emergency dispatchers and also announced the name of the shooter, but this turned out to be the wrong person and it actually damaged their reputation. In 2016, Anonymous returned. They turned their back on the places that they once organised in, chat rooms and forums that became adjacent to 4chan. And more recently, in the murder of George Floyd in America, they've seen a massive upsurge of interest in Anonymous online. And that is how they've managed to be able to rally together so many people for a Million Mask March. So I thought this was really interesting and definitely something that I think that people need to learn about and also understand as well. I really appreciate you joining me for this news. Please don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe. I'll be back again very shortly with some more news. Peace.
92-year-old grandfather on the 6th of June in 1944 going up Song Beach into the jaws of machine guns to fight fascism so that we can have freedom. You standing there as a grown man being fearful of a cold virus is not a risk. What he did was risk. This is my mine.
They're ready to attack, and we have to stop on camera.
You are a liar.